Welcome to the Election Protection Podcast, where we talk all things election integrity. This is Josh Findlay, Director of the Election Protection Project, and we are brought to you today by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Here we are on the eve of a big New Jersey election that, quite frankly, is giving off Glenn Youngkin vibes from 2021 in Virginia. It seems like conservatives are really making there's a shift in momentum in the state, and conservatives are really making inroads. We're joined today by Executive Director of the New Jersey GOP, Kate Gibbs. Kate, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Kate, I've got to ask, the reason that anybody even cares about this race is because it seems like it's close. New Jersey does have somewhat of a history of electing Republican governors, but a lot of people don't think of New Jersey as a red state. What has shifted in the state lately to make this a close race?
Well, everything we feel on the ground is just tremendous energy, enthusiasm for Jack Ciattarelli and for all of our down ballot candidates. But it's really coming from a place of bad policy from, 25 years of the Democrats completely controlling the state legislature, 8 years with Phil Murphy and one party rule has led to disastrous conditions here in New Jersey. It's completely unaffordable. Our electric bills are through the roof. There's overdevelopment crisis. There's an education crisis, a public safety crisis, and people are really just saying that they're fed up, they've had enough, and they want change. We're also seeing really interesting underlying voter registration changes. In 2021, the voter registration gap was over a million. It was about 1.1 million voter difference between Democrats and Republicans. And over the past few years, Republican registrations have been growing and Democrats have been declining. And so we've been able to close that gap to about 850,000, which is still large, but there's a huge share of unaffiliated voters that we believe are also hungry for change and are going to vote with Republicans to make that change by electing Jack Ciattarelli and our full slate of assembly candidates and other down ballot races.
Well, so let me ask you this. You talk about shifts in voter registration there. You actually come from a union background. People typically think about that as a Democrat background. What's shifting on the ground? Tell us what potential union members, the labor, you talked about cost of living. How is this affecting shifts in the state?
Yeah, we've seen huge shifts, especially among building trades labor union members, where even if the union leadership is supporting Democratic candidates, the membership in overwhelming majorities are starting to support Republican candidates. That really started with President Trump was able to bring a lot of those working class, blue collar folks over to even consider voting for Republicans. And here in New Jersey, like you said, it's about affordability and it's about job opportunities. Having labor protections is great as long as there's work opportunities. But the Democrats here in New Jersey who support labor protections, but then do everything they can to undermine our economy and take away the opportunities, now the working condition is that they're unemployed. Right. And so you have to balance both the labor protections with the economic opportunities. And that's exactly what Jack Ciattarelli and our Republican Assembly candidates want to do is find that balance so that everybody has an opportunity to earn an honest day's pay, to be able to put their kids into a good school system in a safe community, buy a home. It's the American dream. And for so many in the working class here in New Jersey, the Democrats have really crushed that dream with their insane policies that have just been failures. And so, again, we're hearing it everywhere we go. There has never been a candidate more aggressive and more hardworking than Jack Ciattarelli. He goes up and down the state, will talk to anybody, answer any question. And we are hearing it over and over again that people are fed up. They just want an opportunity to, like I said, make a good living, raise their family, have their parents and grandparents stay around to see their kids be raised. But the unaffordability from all of these crazy policies have really impacted people. And that's allowing us, I think, to make real significant gains. People, we're kind of delivering the message that President Trump delivered. Give us a shot, right? You've had 25 years of one party being in charge. And where has that gotten us? Give us a shot.
That's exactly right. No, it's amazing what cost of living, it really is hitting your average American here. And, you were talking about crazy Democrat policies. I would say that extends to their election integrity policies. Before we get off voter registration really quick, though, you talked about a large or growing number of unaffiliated registered voters in New Jersey. What does that do election integrity wise? Does that raise any concerns with the party there?
So we've always had a really significant block and proportion of our voters being registered as unaffiliated. So that's nothing new. Again, the bigger trend is really how many people are becoming registered Republicans. The Democrats had implemented automatic voter registration, where instead of opting in, you have to opt out now. Places like the DMV and other times that when you interact with the government, you now automatically get you get registered as a voter. Even you have to opt out rather than opt in. And that has led to increases in Republican registration, which I think surprised everybody, including the Democrats who pushed this policy. But the unaffiliated voters have always been a large share. And where that really comes into play is in things like at the boards of elections. In New Jersey, every single county has a lot of discretion over who runs their elections, how they're run. And so in some counties, there's boards of elections. Others have superintendents of elections. Some have a combination of boards of elections, superintendents of elections, and clerks. And the roles for each of those offices vary from county to county. But in every one of those departments who are running the elections, there's many opportunities for bipartisan representation. One of the biggest examples of that is poll worker parity, meaning the temporary workers who are hired by these boards of elections to run the polling places is supposed to have parity, supposed to have an equal number of Democrats and Republicans by statute. Now, of course, that's going to be difficult to have perfect parity everywhere. And so in those cases, those poll worker positions are filled with first unaffiliated and then Democrats. One of our big initiatives early on and for the past, months has been to recruit Republican poll workers in the places where we're not achieving parity, because by law, the D's and U's are supposed to be replaced by our Republicans that we submit. And so that's an ongoing battle. And we're going to stay on it and make sure we get as close to parity as possible. But to your point about unaffiliateds in those roles, that's where it gets a little bit complicated, right? Because of course we'd rather have an unaffiliated. If we can't get perfect parity with D's and R's, right? Then as long the next best thing would be to have unaffiliateds rather than Democrats, fully running these what are supposed to be bipartisan, poll workers. So the unaffiliated piece gets a little bit tricky, because who's to say that they're not Democrats who just changed their affiliation to be marked as an unaffiliated, and now it looks more like we're getting parity, but we're really not achieving it, which is why it's so important for us that we recruit as many of those Republican poll workers so that we can replace not only the D's, but ideally we want to replace all the D's and U's and get to perfect parity.
Well, so you're exactly right about a couple of things there. First of all, the unaffiliated voters. We have done a lot of work at the Election Protection Project with poll workers and poll watchers. And one thing we found in Michigan for the 2024 election was that even a lot of the people that were being hired as Republican poll workers had a history of voting Democrat. We're not sure how they got labeled as Republicans, right? They might just be applying as Republicans, who knows, but they had a history of voting Democrat. What assurances can you put in place for people to know that the party is achieving parity when it comes to these poll workers?
Well, again, there were some counties, Essex County and Hudson County and Mercer and Union and lots of places throughout New Jersey where we weren't even close. I mean, these were full Democrat poll workers completely running everything. And so
just a couple of years ago, didn't you have to bring in the National Guard to fill Republican poll worker spots in New Jersey?
I think are you talking about during the pandemic?
It might have been, but it was several years ago, 2021, 2022.
I think that was during the pandemic. It was hard to get. I mean, those were just kind of crazy times in general. And I wasn't working at State Party then, so I don't know all the particulars of that, but it's been an ongoing problem. And what we've found as we're pushing and submitting these poll workers is that a lot of these boards were not too thrilled to replace, everybody. These poll workers make $300 a day when they're serving as a poll worker. And so there were a lot of places where they had stopped even trying to achieve parity, and they had, their list of people that were used to getting that $300 on election day. And unfortunately, it's like, I'm sorry, but it's the law. You got to replace them with these Republicans. And we did get a lot of pushback, but that's why these election integrity efforts that the NJGOP, working in partnership, hand in glove with the RNC, but also working hand in hand with all of our local county parties. In New Jersey, the county parties, it's different than everywhere else in the country. In New Jersey, your county parties, everything is very home rule. And so your county parties really do have a lot of authority and, command over what's happening in their area. So working with the county party, the NJGOP, and the RNC all together to really push in all of these places. Again, we're not going to get to perfect parity everywhere, but we're making sure that there are Republican eyes in every polling place and on every machine. And that's in that combination of the poll workers and the poll watchers, meaning those challengers. So both of those efforts were very aggressive over the last, this wasn't something that we just started working on, a few weeks ago. Our election integrity team have been at this for a year, months, making sure that the poll workers, the poll watchers, our election attorney program, and the proactive litigation. So there's multiple pieces to election integrity, and it's not a set it and forget it type thing. It's something we work on every single day. And a lot of times it's fighting with bureaucrats in these local county offices who say, well, we've always done it this way. And I've always had, so-and-so down the street work that polling location, and she relies on that money. And that's all great. But the law says that if we recruit the Republican poll worker and they're qualified and they get trained, you need to replace those D's and U's with our people. So again, unfortunately, it's not like it would be great if we submitted the names and everybody did what they're supposed to. That would be great, but that's not how the real world works. And so we don't have any, illusions that that's how it works. We're making sure that we stay on top of it every single day.
Oh, that's great to hear. Let me ask you this. The RNC has been good, I think, about litigating about lack of poll worker parity. I mean, we're getting down to the deadline here. Does it seem like there's going to have to be any lawsuits to force these counties to comply?
So a lot of the litigation that we've undertaken in partnership with the RNC has really been more about transparency and accountability. And I don't think there's anywhere we're going to be suing specifically on poll worker parity because we've been pushing this for so long that we're getting to a really good place. Like I said, the litigation that we've pursued so far has really been centered around transparency and accountability because you don't know what you don't know. We don't know the poll worker assignments and what the parity looks like unless they answer the open public records request. So everything that we have requested through Oprah are things that we are absolutely entitled to. And then some counties don't want to respond to them. And those are opportunities for us because the law is clear that we are entitled to this information, things like logs, things like footage. They have to give those to us. And so that's where we're pushing on the litigation. And a lot of this is really to send a message statewide that we're paying attention, we're organized, we're energized. You're not going to get away with, the business as usual, the little minor, the things you do that play in the gray, the little, I call it micro cheating, right? It's not it's not a big grand conspiracy. It's little micro cheating in all of these places. And so I think that most important with, again, our this multi-pronged strategy is to make sure that they know that the business as usual, the things that they may have gotten away with in the past, with the county party, state party, and RNC all working together on this, they're not going to get away with it.
I love it. Well, that's good. You got to hold people accountable, which brings us to Passaic County. There's been a lot that's happened there with transparency and everything else. Tell us a little bit first about the history of Passaic County, because election integrity issues are not new in this part of New Jersey.
Yeah, unfortunately, Passaic County is kind of a poster child for a lot of different election integrity issues throughout the years. But what's most concerning is that there are people who have been indicted for voter fraud who are still sitting in elected official positions. And so the Attorney General here in New Jersey has failed to, bring all of these cases to fruition. It's almost unimaginable that people who are indicted in voter fraud are still being allowed to serve in these positions. And then when we asked for some very basic, common sense, commonplace vote by mail storage security, the two Democrat Board of Elections commissioners, one of them is the Democratic County Chairman for Passaic, John Curry, voted against very simple, commonplace security measures that we see in other counties. So when you combine the fact that you have this history of indictments that were not fully adjudicated, combined with Democrat commissioners saying no to the Republican commissioners who are just asking for very, again, basic security measures, it starts to paint a picture. If there's nothing to hide, then why be against very basic security measures, especially in light of all of the recent history and it's all centered around vote by mail, right? Which we know is the most easy to manipulate. Are the vote by mail ballots, right? And the way that they're stored, the way that they're processed, the way that they're counted, our Republican Board of Election Commissioners just wanted some very simple things put in place. The two Democrats voted no. And when you combine that with the history, it left us no other choice but to pursue, take it up a notch. If the attorney general is not going to protect fair elections in New Jersey, then we're going to go to the federal government. We put in an official request to the Department of Justice to send special monitors for the election, not only at the polling places, but really at the Board of Elections, where that's ground zero for the vote by mail ballot operation, where they're stored, where they're processed, where they're counted. And so we really want to make sure that we have eyes there. And again, sunlight's the best medicine. And you would think that this shouldn't be a partisan issue. Democrats and Republicans both should want fair elections with transparency and accountability, and make sure that all of the legal votes get counted. Unfortunately, it looks like this has become a partisan issue, but we're always going to stand up for election integrity, and we're going to push it to the furthest extent that we can by law. And we're pursuing every legal option we have, whether it's about poll workers, whether it's about challengers, whether it's about these very clear election integrity issues on vote by mail ballots. We're going to pursue every legal option we have.
Well, so I think there's a couple of things that are important to emphasize for context here. I think the first thing is that when you say fraud, it's actual fraud. The charges were fraud. This is not people saying fraud and using it as like a euphemism for just election irregularities, right? There were 4 people that were charged with fraud in a Passaic County council race, city council race, I think, for Paterson, New Jersey, several years ago, right? So when we talk fraud, we are actually talking fraud here. The second thing is, and I think this is important, is this was a county that was traditionally Democrat, right? It voted left for a long time. But in 2024, it flipped Republican. So there is an incentive, I think, for Democrat leadership. And when the Board of Elections and the Democrat leadership in the county, that's the same person, I think there is an incentive there to try to flip things back to the Democrats, right? Now, what were the things that the party asked for? Because these are basic, and I think we should get into this. But ask for the most basic things. What were they?
So they wanted video surveillance on the ballot storage room.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted a log of who was when ballots are coming in, who's going in and out of that ballot storage room.
Yep.
There is a lock on there, but they could not, there is a bipartisan lock on the door, but the lock had been in place, the Republican lock anyway, had been in place for over 10 years, and the board could not tell us anything about the chain of custody of keys, how many keys were out there, who had them. So again, that's why if you can't really trust the lock system that's in place, you want to make sure that there are these additional measures in place, which are very simple and again, commonplace in other counties, which is the video surveillance and an official log. They voted against those. The other thing they voted against, in 2021, there was major issues with certifying the election. Passaic County was the poster child, by the way. And there was so much more vote by mail than typical. It took days to get through all the counting and to certify. And so actually weeks in the case of Passaic. And so the legislature in New Jersey actually passed a new bill to allow for 5 days of pre-processing of the ballots. So 5 days before the election, they're allowed to start doing the initial processing steps, not fully counting them and running them through the tabulator, but just pre-processing. That way, on election day, you can count them very quickly and you can move towards certification much more quickly. It gives voters a little bit more confidence when things are wrapping up quickly, right? Like voters want to know on election day where we are. So Passaic was one of the poster children counties for why this legislation was passed. Now that it's been passed, almost every county in the state is using it, except Passaic. So the 2 Republican Board of Elections commissioners said, why, we want to start taking advantage of these extra 5 days that we're now allowed by law, and they voted against it. And so again, when you take, so there was all this confusion around vote by mail, and you take that in combination with the Democratic county chairman being one of these Board of Election commissioners, saying no to simple security measures, saying no to using the pre-processing, again, it starts to paint a picture when you have this very recent history of people who were indicted. They didn't get a slap on the wrist, they were indicted. They just haven't been fully brought to justice because the attorney general is, again, under that one-party rule that we've had for 8 years. And so we really wanted to make sure that voters in Passaic, which is such an important county for all the points you raised, it's a county where we're seeing a tremendous amount of movement. A lot of that is credited to President Trump, but also just the new coalition of Republican voters. And again, middle-class families who are just sick and tired of not being able to make it, right? Not being able to climb to that next rung, not being able to buy a bigger home, because there's no way to afford it, not being able to pay your electric bill. We have senior citizens who are saying, I'm deciding between putting the heat on and picking up my prescription medicine. I mean, so you see these major changes happening in places like Passaic. And so again, it's one of the really important places that we're watching for this gubernatorial. But it's also about the down ballot races. In 2021, Jack Ciattarelli did very well in Passaic County and helped usher in down ballot wins. And the county commissioner races there, they were about to lose 2 of the seats. And then all of a sudden, in the last minute, days after the election, the exact number of ballots that they needed to recover one of the commissioner's seats were found. And then we lost one of the commissioner's seats, right? And then again, that whole debacle in 21 was why this legislation was created. And they're the only county, one of the only counties in the state not taking advantage of it. Again, a lot of smoke, no fire, but a lot of smoke. And we're gonna run towards it and make sure we figure out, that we have eyes on all these things and that this election is being run fairly.
Well, and that goes back to the micro cheating that you talked about earlier, right? If there's anything that we learned, I think, from the chaos of the 2020 election, it's that when there is an opening, people have an incentive to take advantage of it. So we have to seal off all of those openings. And I think one thing that's important to emphasize about those video cameras you talked about, these are standard practice in election integrity now, to have videos on ballots. I was observing an election in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, not too long ago. And Bucks County is not a hotbed of election integrity, if you know the history there, right? It was a place where in 2020, they had too many mail-in ballots because universal mail-in voting was instituted last minute. So they just had piles of ballots stacked floor to ceiling and, everything else. But they video all of the ballots. And they have the monitors to show, so you can see what the videos are doing. Anybody can walk into the elections office, watch those monitors, keep an eye on the ballots. And it's that way throughout the whole county election offices. I mean, this is standard practice that they are denying in Passaic there. So
yeah, and we have ballot drop boxes around the state. Every county has a number of ballot drop boxes that are open during a specific window of vote by mail. And by law, they have to be under 24-hour video surveillance. The public is entitled to that video footage. In New Jersey, you can only be a bearer or carry 3 ballots. That's the limit. So ideally, you'd like to be able to look at the footage and make sure that someone's not walking up with a whole big armful, right? Or bag is full. One of the things we started putting an Oprah request for in the past few months was just the Dropbox footage. And there are some counties that are saying no. If we're not supposed to get it, then why did they put it in the statute? And why is it available under Oprah? And yet they're saying no. So again, it just makes you wonder, if sunlight's the best medicine, and we all agree that transparency and accountability are good things, then why are you fighting us on these very simple, common sense, and you don't need to be an election integrity expert. I think if you asked any person off the street, does this make sense? They would say, yeah, there should be cameras. Yeah, we should have a log.
That's right. No, and it's interesting that you say that, because this is a theme on this podcast for this year. Our listeners know just so many instances of the left just refusing to follow state law, like in this case, right? Refusing to turn over those election records. Well, let's end, Kate, talking about the Department of Justice observers that NJGOP has requested. What is your hope for getting these observers into the state? And what have you heard from the Department of Justice about this?
So I'm not an attorney. I just want to be clear about that. I'm just a, political hack. But we have a really great legal team that we're working with, NJGOP counsel, as well as the RNC election integrity team, our regional NJGOP election integrity folks. We're all working together on this. The hope is that, again, sunlight's the best medicine. The very presence of having these DOJ monitors here in New Jersey, paying attention, we're hoping will act as a prophylactic, that they know that we're paying attention, that we have eyes on it. And we're hoping that they'll be at the Board of Elections to help us monitor these vote by mail ballot storage issues, because again, they did at the meeting on October 17th, they voted against these very simple measures. So we want to make sure that not only are they at polling places, but they're at the Board of Elections, just to make sure that the counting of these vote by mail ballots, that the signature comparisons, that the way that they're processed is all done fairly. We just want the law followed. That's it. We don't want special treatment. We just want everything to run the way the law says that it should, which is that every legal ballot should be counted. right? That's all we're asking for. And so far our request has only been about Passaic, but we're looking into other counties, and we've pursued other election integrity litigation in places like Gloucester County, in places like Burlington County. So this isn't, we're not only focused on Passaic. We're looking everywhere. So Democrats in all 21 counties should be on notice that we are paying attention. We're organized. You're not going to get away with the business as usual this year.
So what would you say to liberals that are saying, oh, you're bringing in the Department of Justice? This is going to have a chilling effect on voters, because I know this is the argument that the left is going to make about this.
I just truly don't understand that. And I just completely disagree with the premise. That's ridiculous to me.
Well, Kate, it goes back to when I was doing Glenn Youngkin's election integrity in 2021. The Washington Post interviewed Fairfax County election administrator, Fairfax, Virginia. It's one of the biggest counties in the state. He said, yeah, we had to do things by the book this time because we knew people were watching.
This time. Right.
That's exactly right, Kate. That's exactly right. Good luck in getting people there. What can we do? How can we let our listeners know how to find out more about what the NJGOP is working on, potentially get involved in election integrity? How can they find out more about the operations up there?
So the number one thing I want to leave with is the best way to fight this micro cheating that happens is to turn out so overwhelmingly and vote so that these little micro cheating don't have an impact. We're on top of it. We are taking the fight straight to them, as you can see, everything we just talked about, right? But the way that we need our Republican voters to show up and fight for us is just to go vote. Early voting is happening now through November 2nd. And then, of course, Election Day is Tuesday, November 4th. So the first thing that everybody needs to do is go vote. I already did early voting. It's wonderful. Please go bank your vote. You never know what's going to happen. But if people want more information about what's going on, they should follow us on all of our channels. We're NJGOP on Twitter, X. We're New Jersey Republican State Party on Facebook. And our website is njgop.org. You can go to the volunteer tab and sign up. There's also information about election integrity and all of our candidates as well.
Thanks for joining us, Kate.
Thank you so much.
And you can find all of the episodes of the Election Protection Podcast on YouTube. Just Google or just search for the Texas Public Policy Foundation. They are the sponsor of this podcast. All of our episodes will pop up, and we look forward to having you get involved in this New Jersey race. It's going to be a hot one. Thanks.